Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. And during the month of October, I talk about some of the more spooky literature that has interested me. And since today is Poetry Thursday, a wonderful day to talk about poetry, I wanted to focus on some more spooky poetry during this month. And today I think I found a poem that seems to be at least about ghosts and cemeteries. I am referring to A Chilly Night by Christina Rosetti. For those who don't know, Christina Rosetti was an English writer who lived throughout the 1800s. She is mostly known for her poetry, but she did also write novellas and short stories and some other things. And she's been well regarded for her work. One of her most famous poems, and one that I read recently but didn't want to talk about because it was just too long and there was going to be too much to talk about for the Poetry Thursday format that I have going on. But one of them is called Goblin Market, which is about what appears to be a woman kidnapped by goblins or getting too close to goblins. It seems to be a parable of some sort, or like an allegory similar to that of Eve having eaten an apple and been like cast out of Eden. The woman partakes in the goblin market and is cast out as a result. It's a very interesting poem, and I strongly suggest that you go read it because Christina Rosetti is a very fascinating poet, and that poem is worth reading. But the themes that you find there are present in a lot of her other work. She writes about religion and the supernatural, sort of otherworldly kind of things, and she writes frequently about death. She was seen as somewhat of an aloof character, not to the extent of Emily Dickinson, mind you, but along similar lines. And I think that's what attracts me to her poetry, because it makes it very strange and unusual and very aligning with the ideas that I frequently talk about on this channel. So I wanted to explore one of them that I found today, and I strongly urge all of you, like not only during the month of October but outside of it, to go look at Christina Rosetti's poems, as there's something different. There's something very interesting and sort of haunting and otherworldly, as I've said before, about those poems that make it worth exploring. But without further ado, let's talk about this poem. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. A Chilly Night. I rose at the dead of night and went to the lattice alone to look for my mother's ghost where the ghostly moonlight shone. My friends had failed one by one, middle-aged, young and old, till the ghosts were warmer to me than my friends that had grown cold. I looked and I saw the ghosts dotting plain and mound. They stood in the blank moonlight, but no shadow lay on the ground. They spoke without a voice, and they leaped without a sound. I called, "Oh, my mother dear," I sobbed, "Oh, my mother kind. Make a lonely bed for me and shelter it from the wind. Tell the others not to come to see me night or day, but I need to tell my friends to be sure to keep away." My mother raised her eyes, they were blank and could not see, yet they held me with their stare while they seemed to look at me. She opened her mouth and spoke. I could not hear a word, while my flesh crept on my bones and every hair was stirred. She knew that I could not hear the message that she told, whether I had long to wait or soon should sleep in the mold. I saw her toss her shadowless hair and wring her hands in the cold. I strained to catch her words, and she strained to make me hear, but never a sound of words fell on my straining ear. From midnight to cockcrow I kept my watch in pain, while the subtle ghost grew subtler in the sad night on the wane. From midnight to cockcrow I watched till all were gone, some to sleep in the shifting sea, and some under turf and stone. Living had failed, and dead had failed, and I was indeed alone. In terms of analysis, this is a pretty sad poem, A Chilly Night. It seems easy to get to guess the narrative of the poem or figure out the narrative with the narrator seeing their mother at night, along with maybe a few other ghosts, and trying to speak with her mother, trying to find comfort in this feeling of loneliness, and ultimately not being able to hear her mother, not being able to find that comfort that she wants. And at the end of the poem, the narrator feels alone, which is a very devastating kind of way to end the poem. As she says, some to sleep in the shifting sea, and some under turf and stone. Living had failed, and dead had failed, and I was indeed alone. And those last two lines, like living had failed, she couldn't find any solace with people who were alive, and dead had failed because she couldn't even talk with the dead, and so it felt like there was no one for her. A very sad poem indeed. You could argue that this is a very literal poem and that she's actually talking to a ghost, but because of the way the afterlife works or something like that, she's not able to communicate across the spiritual barrier or something like that. You can make that argument, but also you could figure this is happening in the figurative sense, because throughout the poem she offers some clues as what's actually happening here. She says she went to the lattice alone to look for my mother's ghost where the ghostly moonlight shone. So she's looking out of a window upon something. What is she looking at? She says, I looked and I saw the ghosts dotting plain and mound. They stood in the blank moonlight, but no shadow lay on the ground. And what I think is happening, what you can kind of guess from this poem, is she's actually looking at a graveyard, a cemetery, and she might be speaking to her mother's headstone and finding like no answer from the ghost, the grave essentially, and being like, can I be in this grave with you, and not finding, that is really helping, not finding any solace from this grief that she's feeling. And so, I do like how you could argue both interpretations, but I also like the way that that Rosetti is describing the graveyard in this place, using only moonlight and describing it like a row of ghosts. Like the headstones are ghosts, which are kind of shaped in the way that we typically have ghosts, like the cartoon ghosts at least. But I doubt the ghosts look like that for Rosetti back in the 1800s. But something interesting to consider there. But another interesting element of the poem is what happens when she talks to her mother. If you view this as her talking to a ghost, or even just her talking to a gravestone, it works either way. You feel the desperation as the poem goes on for her to try to hear what her mother is saying, that maybe she's offering some answer that might help her, that she's been looking for, that she can't find quite now. And what she says is, she opened her mouth and spoke. I could not hear a word, while my flesh crept on my bones and every hair was stirred, which is interesting because it's like, the answer's coming, you just can't hear it. And then she says she knew that I could not hear the message that she told, whether I had long to wait or would soon to sleep in the mold. I saw her toss her shadowless hair and wring her hands in the cold. Like the ghost is even getting a little upset here. And then she said, I strained to catch her words, and she strained to make me hear, but never a sound of words fell on my straining ear. So you see the desperation growing in the narrator's voice, which only adds to the sadness when overall she just can't hear whatever this ghost is trying to tell her. That there's just the spiritual barrier, as I mentioned before, is just too large. And I think that adds to the overall enjoyment and sadness I feel when I read this poem of feeling lost, maybe in your grief or in your old age, of feeling like you have no one around anymore, of like you've experienced a great loss and you want answers or something like that, but you can't get answers from the dead, and so you're left to wallow in your loneliness and hope that things get better, and you don't know how things are going to get better. And so I that's a really deep and profound sort of feeling that Rosetti is writing about here. Maybe she experienced it in her own life. Maybe she was just really good at capturing that essence. I don't think it particularly matters, but it is interesting if that happened in her own life. Anyway, those are my thoughts on A Chilly Night by Christina Rosetti. A pretty wonderful poem, and one that I am going to recommend that you read. I will put a link to it in the description so that you can tell me what you think about it in the comments below. Let's have a discussion here. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Rosetti if they don't already know, or this poem, or even Poetry Thursday. If they want to check out more of those videos. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and chilly night travels. Farewell.